Hello everybody and good morning. As I've been introduced, my name is Jacqui. I'm from the School of Nursing and Midwifery. Before I start this presentation, I would like to just put it into a little bit of context for you, because I think what's really important with when we're looking at technology and student engagement, there are a couple of things we have to think about. The first is that student engagement just isn't in learning and assessment. It's actually in the community of the university. And as much as I will concentrate on the sort of the learning aspect of it, I think we do need to realise that feeling part of a community for students is very important. The other context I'm going to put it in for you is my actual background myself. I've been teaching nurses and midwives for years now, and so many of these experiences that I'm going to talk about are from a nursing and education point of view, because nurse education is actually very, very varied. They do biosciences, they do psychology, sociology, they do politics, and within that wrapped up, they have to do things, for example, like critical thinking skills. They have to do things like communication skills, problem solving. They have to understand reflection and lifelong learning. So these things impact on and contribute to some of the things I'm going to look at. The other thing to say is that it's going to be a hard act to follow coming behind Mary and Roy. Guys, it's some fantastic stuff there. And there may be a little bit of repetition with what Roy said as well. So we'll start on. I'll put my glasses on. Oopsie daisy, I always do this. Right. I always click on the screen and not the magic button. Right, just to give you an overview of what does engagement mean, it goes back to that first issue I raised. It is about creating, maintaining, stimulating an intellectual environment. What's very important, and it was a question that was asked of Roy earlier, is about valuing academic work and high standards. And sometimes we can struggle with students doing that. I do have that issue where students turn up and they've not done anything, or they sit there going, tell me what to write. And that can be quite difficult and challenging. You need to monitor and respond to the demographic subgroup differences. This also means that we do need to get away from the idea of the digital native and the digital immigrant. They don't really actually work within a technology environment. What we're discovering is that people use technology for different reasons, and that's what the issue that we've got to sort of concentrate on, not dividing our students either by gender or by age. The same with the X generation, things like that too. We need expectation management. That's something that I've come across again and again with students and also other members of the teaching team. Foster social connections, acknowledge the challenges, because there are challenges in all our learning. Target self-management strategies for students, and I think that links back into management with students and expectations. Use the assessment to shape. The first thing a student will do when they walk into a classroom is say, is this in the exam? Am I going to be tested on this? And I think that's what we've got to, that all then links into expectation as well. Managing an online learning experience with care. Abandon it at your will. It's a monster, it's like a golem that will run away with you and create mischief if you're not careful. And recognise the complex nature of engagement. As Roy pointed out about the different teaching theories about teaching and learning, so we need to think about how this engagement impacts on that. And this is taken from the references below, and if anybody wants any further references, I can send them to you. So what's the considerations for choosing technology? I think the first thing to realise is learning spaces. What are they? They're actually very varied. Yes, we do face-to-face with tutorials, we do face-to-face with consultations with students, but it can be on campus, it can be off campus, it can be in the bus stop on the way in, it can be mobile, it's ubiquitous. And therefore we've got to realise, well, how do we and our students access that learning space? The real issue is the engagement with the students. I've worked with units where we've used a lot of technology and there's been no face-to-face. But I've been very restricted on what I can use to actually engage with the students. Tutor's presence is really, really important. When you set up, for example, a discussion board, be the first person to post, go in frequently, respond to posts, it's very important. Link what you're doing to the learning outcomes. is the technology that you're thinking about appropriate for assessments formatively and summatively? Feedback, there are student surveys which are done in the UK, in America, and here that ask students about their teaching and learning and ask students about their engagement. And it's the same thing every time. They want much better and informative feedback on how they're doing, and they want face-to-face as well. Also, it has to be linked to available technology. The other key, I hate this word, key stakeholders even, which is very important because as lecturers and academics, we don't teach in isolation. We have other professionals who come on board with us. Policy, university policy and guidelines is very important because that guides us and supports us. Avoid bolt-on if you can possibly, by saying we need to do this online now. It can be very detrimental to students and to the people who design it. And also avoid death by technology as well. Make sure it's appropriate, that I think sometimes, because there is so much out there, we almost feel like it's a smorgasbord. And sometimes you don't need to travel the length of the smorgasbord, you just need to pick off one thing, because that's the best thing for your students. Student engagement should be an active process. You can't sit back and expect students to engage. Education is social, learning is social, so therefore it should be the formation of a community. And that is a different type of community. That's a community within you on a one-to-one, setting up a dyad or a relationship. It's you and a group of students, or it's a group of students and a group of students. So that community is diverse and different and would be related to what the expectations of the community are. Collaboration is very important. One of the things I've done, for example, with discussion boards is to get students to work in small groups, go out, find a research article, and then feedback to the rest of the groups about why they found that interesting. Participation, waves around top participation are saying if you participate in this discussion board, that's 10% of your summative marks. That's amazing how that helps. That helps with socialising, and again, back to management of expectation, value added, fit for purpose and inclusive. And the thing about the academic is you are not outside of this process. You're actually an important, to a certain extent, gone is the stage, the sage on the stage, you're the guide at the side, and that sort of does apply. Although, we were talking about this earlier, storytelling is something that students really like, and it's something related to nursing. And it's that value from the face-to-face. When I do tutorials with students, I talk about the time I was a student nurse, or the time when I was first qualified, or when I was working in this environment, and they do like that. And I think that's the value added we could bring to technology. Start simple. It really is pick one thing that you feel confident about doing and undertaking. Review your own teaching. One of the things we have to do as nurses is a reflective practice, which we have to do as part of professional development and lifelong learning. Review students' feedback on the teaching. Did they like that? If they liked it, if they didn't like it, maybe think about doing something else. Identify your own skills. Get support. If there's one issue, it's the pedagogy before the technology. What do you want to get from this? If you want students to do something reflective, you're not going to set up a quiz. You'd be surprised, right? If you want them to maybe do a reflective diary or talk about reflective, maybe a discussion board or a wiki is somewhere to go. What do you want them to achieve? It's expectations, setting them up to know that they know exactly what's expected of them to learn. Don't forget learning design, teaching strategies and assessment strategies, and really important feedback, whether it's immediate feedback or long-term feedback. So I'm just rushing through because I've got the wave of how to sort of move on quickly. Some of the things are really straightforward. When I first started using technology, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I started off with making announcements on the announcement board for the VLE I was working in, and it was fantastic. I would say, who saw the TV last night? There was a programme on culture of donation. It was great. Should we talk about it in class? Or this article's just come out, would you all like to read it? So it's a one-way street. You're not getting feedback from the students, but it's a great way. Discussion boards are fantastic. You can really get people to debate, but they need to be structured. You need to show students how to behave in them, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. But you can get small groups to come together and work. The reason I've put this up very quickly is because it's also not just about undergraduates that you find. So for example, there's somebody here called Andy who's doing a blog on his PhD, and he talks about his, for example, he posts and he says things like, here's my Twitter account, this is what I'm feeding into, here are the tags for the things that I've posted. So from that point of view, that's a resource to share and engage with people. He also has a wiki, and he posts his writing on his wiki, and his supervisors write back on his wiki and say, for example, that's a very interesting point, but what do you mean by this? So it's a learning tool, but it's a great way of communicating. Here is something I started doing for my PhD, and I've just started doing a blog and writing down. So again, I can say to people, here's my blog. You're more than welcome to put a comment on it. Please be kind, or you can make suggestions about resources and things like that too. So as well as undergraduate, postgraduate. And the other thing, because I've looked at this is my Facebook. No, you can't be my friend. I'm very selective. But you do have students. You can set up closed Facebook accounts so that you can just engage with a small group of students. And the reason I've put this up is one of the areas I'm interested in is the actor network theory. It's something I'm thinking about for methods for my PhD. And there are people here posting and saying, here's some ideas. Do you want to here's a conference. So it does allow both formal and informal communication, which I think is really important. Oopsie daisies, there's the other one on my, where are we? Skype, very quickly, I do consultations with Skype, so my students spend time in work-related basis. They go out in clinical, so sometimes it's easy for them just to find a PC, and I Skype them. We've done the polls everywhere. Roy was talking about another software, there's free in software, and they really enjoy it. You put something up and you say something for a joke like, how many chambers has the heart got? I don't know what it is. And sometimes you post up things like 1, 3, 4, or 5, and it's great because you could see them thinking sometimes, like, is that a trick question? Peer assessment, very, very important. You can use the polls everywhere to say to students who do presentations, let's all vote on this, let's discuss it. Because the feedback back from peer assessment is it helps with their own assessment. It helps them engage with the assessment process and gives them insight to it. Serious games is something else that you can engage students with. And something I do have used in the past as well is Second Life. I'm sorry that was all a bit rushed, but I was running out of time. So there, just a bit of an overview and some ideas. Thank you.
We have time for questions. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about serious games in the virtual environment.
All right, so serious games are yeah, the fun stuff. Serious games is just a term given to games which are to have a specific outcome, and in this case it's educational. So one of the things you could do, and which I've used before in the past, is that you can use quizzes, but you could use them with small groups, and the outcome is that they would have to what did we use before? They had to identify the different body systems and relate them to a big drawing of a body, because I teach biosciences. And what happens is that the teams had to identify where they went to get their information, and the first team that came back with credible information won a packet of biscuits. But, it's stuff that actually gets them to engage with that process, and it can be anything from a quiz to something quite extensive, for example. Because another one I was going to put there was crowdsourcing. Because if you ever have a technology problem and you go online, they say, do you want to go to the crowdsource? And you go, okay, and there's this just wealth of discussion boards about people who talk about their own experience of fixing things. So that's another way that you could get students to engage with other people to contribute to their teaching and learning. And it's the same with games. You've got massive online gaming, and the biggest growth there is middle-aged women who put on their avatars and go off and play, So those are kind of, and it's really up to you. You could make it as structured over a couple of weeks, or you could just make it as small. The game has an output which is normally educational, and that's why it's called serious games. Not that they've grown up in serious. It's not like chess. It's, a fun thing, hopefully.
I have one. What are the games that you use?
The ones I make up myself, basically. So it links back to what you want the student to get from this. And on a very serious note, I've taught in the UK and I've taught in New Zealand, and I now teach in Australia. And it doesn't matter where I go, all student nurses complain that they find biosciences hard, and they struggle with it. And I don't know whether it's the whole math thing or the whole science thing, particularly, because there are issues with that. So one of the things I looked at was developing games and putting games into to sort of break down that barrier a little bit. So I keep them straightforward. It's things like, you know, for example, here are four body systems. The first person to put them anatomically correct on the board in works of teams, and you have to have all four ready before you come up to the board to draw in, that kind of thing. Yeah, just very straightforward things. And there's more complex things out there as well. There's much more research into serious games. Because we all like to play games. Yeah, and that's something you'd never get away from. It's like colouring in. We all like to colour in. And sometimes we know maybe it's not a bad idea to go back and revisit them.
Well, about being creative,
yeah.
Is such an important attribute of
yeah. I think also with education, there's an element of fear sometimes, in the sense that we have quite complex groups of students. We don't have your 18-year-old leaving school coming in. I mean, there are elements of that there. You're dealing with adult students who maybe haven't been inside a formal education for maybe 10, 15 years, and they're quite scared sometimes to show that they don't know or that they're struggling. So maybe trying to engage them in a game is, or Twitter or Facebook. I mean, because there's a lot to be said about lurking as well. People feel that, you know, they may lurk for a little while in the discussion board, but then they build up the confidence to start actually contributing.
Very good point. Would you please join me in thanking
Thank you.